Have you ever heard a child say something so pure, so unexpected it just stops you in your tracks? Well, this is one of those stories. It begins not in a palace or on a stage, but in a quiet hospital room, where an 8-year-old girl, fighting the biggest battle of her short life, looked up at her mom and said something that would change everything. "I just want to meet President Trump." Her name was Emily Johnson, just 8 years old, but already a warrior in every sense of the word. For 2 years, she had battled a rare and aggressive form of cancer, endless rounds of chemo, sleepless nights, pain that no child should ever feel. But through it all, Emily never stopped smiling. She drew pictures for the nurses. She made friendship bracelets for other kids on the ward. She believed in heroes, real ones. And for her, one of them was someone she'd only ever seen on TV. Donald J. Trump. Not because of politics. Not because of what he stood for to adults. But because to her he looked strong. He looked like someone who never gave up. And when you're a child fighting cancer, you cling to strength. You hold on to hope, wherever you can find it. When doctors told Emily's parents the truth, that time was running out. Her mom Karen was devastated. You don't prepare for news like that. You don't learn how to say goodbye to your baby. So, when Emily whispered her final wish, Karen knew what she had to do. Not think, not doubt, just act. She went online and posted a message with a photo of Emily, smiling in her hospital bed. "My daughter has a final wish, to meet President Trump. If anyone can help, please share this." She wasn't expecting much. But what happened next shocked the entire family. That simple message traveled faster than anyone imagined. Within hours it had been shared by thousands, then tens of thousands. Celebrities reposted it. Influencers shared it. News outlets picked it up. The world was listening. And then, just 2 days later, a call came that made Karen drop to her knees. "This is the office of Donald J. Trump. The president would like to meet Emily." Karen couldn't believe it. She thought it was a prank. Until a team of people showed up at the hospital that same afternoon to prepare. No press. No cameras. Just people doing what needed to be done. For one little girl. When he walked in, the room went quiet. Emily's eyes lit up the second she saw him. Dressed in his usual dark suit, white shirt, and bright red tie, Donald Trump stepped into the small hospital room like he'd entered a palace. But he didn't act like a celebrity. He didn't make speeches or grand statements. He walked straight to Emily's bed, knelt down and took her hand. "Hello, sweetheart," he said softly. "I've been waiting to meet you." For the next 40 minutes they just talked. Not about politics. Not about disease. They talked about her favorite animals. Her little brother. What she wanted to be when she grew up. "A superhero," she said. Trump laughed gently. "I think you already are one." After the visit, most people thought that was the end. But Trump wasn't done. Before leaving, he quietly pulled Emily's father aside. No one else heard the conversation, just a few whispered words. But within 48 hours, things began to happen. A representative arrived at the hospital with documents. The family's medical bills, wiped clean. A trust fund was set up for Emily's younger brother's future. And a donation, made in Emily's name, went toward pediatric cancer research. He never tweeted about it. He never held a press conference. He didn't want credit. He wanted that little girl's legacy to matter. And it did. It started with a whisper of desperation, a mother's final attempt to give her daughter one moment of light in a time shadowed by fear and pain. Karen Johnson wasn't someone who lived her life in politics. She wasn't active on the news. She didn't watch debates or read political blogs. She was just a mother. A mother who was losing her 8-year-old daughter, Emily. Cancer had stolen so much from their family already. Laughter, stability, sleep, and now time. Doctors had been clear. There was nothing more they could do. The treatments had failed. The tumors had spread. The pain medications were now simply to keep her comfortable. Karen held Emily's small, fragile hand, wondering what her little girl would say. And that's when it came, soft but certain. "Mom, I just want to meet President Trump." Karen's heart skipped. She stared at Emily's weak smile, her eyes glowing with the innocence and conviction that only a child could carry. Of all the things she could have asked for, a toy, a trip, a celebrity visit, it was this. Donald Trump. To Emily, he wasn't a politician. He was a symbol of strength. She saw him on television and believed he was someone who stood tall even when people were angry. Someone who never backed down. And in her fragile, crumbling world, she needed that. Karen didn't know where to begin. She sat at the edge of the hospital bed that night, phone in her lap, wondering if anyone would even take her seriously. Who could she call? Who would listen? And even if she found a way to reach him, would he care? But something inside her, a mother's instinct, told her to try. Not tomorrow. Not next week. She opened her Facebook page and typed with trembling fingers. "My daughter's last wish is to meet Donald Trump. If anyone can help us make that happen, please." She attached a photo of Emily, taken just the day before, sitting up in her hospital bed with her little stuffed bear tucked under her arm. Her eyes still sparkled, even through the exhaustion. Karen stared at the screen before hitting post. Felt like shouting into a void. But she hit send anyway. She turned off her phone and fell asleep on the hospital couch, not expecting anything. But the universe had different plans. By the time the sun rose, Karen's post had been shared over 1,000 times. Strangers had written messages of love, of support, of heartbreak. People were tagging celebrities, influencers, anyone they thought had a chance to get the message in front of the former president. Then it hit 10,000 shares. Then 50. Karen couldn't keep up with the flood of notifications. Conservative groups picked it up. Then a political commentator retweeted it. Then an aide who once worked with Trump himself reached out with a message. "We've seen the post. Stay by your phone." Karen didn't know what to believe. She cried and laughed all at once, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers, and terrified it might lead nowhere. Then her phone rang. It was a Washington, D.C. number. She hesitated, then answered. A calm, clear voice on the other end said, "Mrs. Johnson, this is the office of Donald J. Trump. The president would like to visit Emily personally." Karen dropped her phone. Literally. It hit the hospital floor. The nurses nearby turned to her as she covered her mouth, shaking. She picked it up quickly, apologizing into the receiver, her voice trembling. "You're serious?" The woman on the line confirmed, yes, they were absolutely serious. Trump had seen the post. He had asked for it to be verified. And once he knew it was real, he didn't hesitate. Karen looked at Emily, sleeping peacefully with her hand still clutching that little bear, unaware that her biggest wish was in motion. The woman on the phone explained that this visit would be private. No press. No political messaging. Just the president and a little girl. "He wants to keep it personal," she said. Karen didn't know what to say. She whispered thank you over and over again, not sure how any of it was real. Over the next 24 hours, security was quietly arranged with the hospital. Staff were briefed. Only Emily's immediate family and a few doctors would be allowed in the room. Everything was handled with the kind of care and sensitivity that shocked Karen. No red tape. No demands. Just a promise. "He's coming." That night Karen told Emily the news. The little girl's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" she asked. Karen nodded. "He's coming to see you, sweetheart." Emily burst into the biggest smile her tired little body could manage. "Mom, he's really coming." "Yes," Karen said, tears streaming down her face. "He really is." Emily looked at her bear and whispered, "He's strong. I want to be strong too." Karen held her close, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. The next morning, the hallway outside the pediatric unit was unusually quiet. Then, just before noon, he arrived. No cameras. No fanfare. Donald Trump walked into the room dressed in his usual dark navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and his signature red tie. But his face wasn't stern. It was soft. Tired maybe. But gentle. Emily looked up from her bed and gasped, her eyes wide in awe. He walked straight to her and knelt beside her bed, not saying a word for a moment. Then he reached out his hand and said, "Hello, Emily. It's an honor to meet you." Emily took his hand slowly, gripping it with all the strength she had left. "You really came," she whispered. He smiled, a real one, not the one people see on stage. "Of course I came. You're a very special girl. And I heard you've been very brave." Emily nodded. "I like how you talk. You don't get scared." Trump chuckled softly. "Sometimes I do. But I try to stay strong, just like you." They talked for nearly 30 minutes. About her favorite ice cream flavor, her dog at home, her favorite superhero, Wonder Woman. He asked if she had a message she wanted to share with the world. Emily thought for a moment and said, "Be nice. Even when it's hard." Trump nodded. "That's a very good message." When it was time for him to go, he stood up, placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You've made me proud today, Emily. I'll never forget you." He handed her a small, folded piece of paper. "This is just for you." Then he turned to Karen, shook her hand firmly and added quietly, "You're an incredible mother." Karen could barely speak. All she could do was whisper, "Thank you for coming." He gave her a nod and left as quietly as he came. Emily opened the letter later that day. It was handwritten, signed with a bold Donald J. Trump. It read, "Dear Emily, you are one of the bravest people I've ever met. You are strong, kind, and full of love. Thank you for letting me visit you. I will always remember you. With love, President Donald J. Trump." That letter stayed on her pillow until the very end. And Karen would keep it framed on her wall for the rest of her life, not as a political souvenir, but as proof that for one shining moment, her daughter's voice reached the highest halls of power and was heard. He walked into the hospital room quietly. No flashing cameras, no Secret Service agents crowding the hallway, no buzzing media frenzy outside the window. Just him. Donald Trump. The man who had once stood at podiums in front of thousands, who had stared down world leaders, who had signed bills and weathered storms both political and personal. But here now, in this quiet, softly lit hospital room, he was just a man who had answered a child's final wish. He wore his signature dark blue suit, white shirt crisp under the glow of the fluorescent lights, and that unmistakable red tie. But what struck everyone wasn't the outfit. It was his face. It wasn't stern or guarded. It was soft, human, maybe even vulnerable. He approached the small bed where 8-year-old Emily Johnson lay, her frame frail beneath the white blanket, her cheeks pale but glowing with joy. This was the moment she'd waited for, dreamt about, whispered to her mom when she thought no one else could hear. The man she had seen on TV, the strong one, the fighter, the leader, was now standing at the foot of her bed. She smiled the biggest smile her little body could manage. Her eyes lit up in disbelief. A soft breath escaped her lips as she reached out her small hand. "You really came," she whispered, her voice fragile, yet full of wonder. Donald Trump didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, lowered himself to one knee beside her, and gently took her hand in his. "Of course I came," he said, voice low and sincere. "You're a brave girl, Emily. And I wanted to meet a true American hero." There was no one else in that room that mattered in that moment. Not the nurses just outside the door, not the aides who had coordinated the quiet arrival. It was just the two of them. A little girl who had spent the last 2 years battling cancer, and a former president who had come to meet her not as a politician, but as a person. They talked for over 30 minutes. Not once did politics come up. Not once did he speak of news headlines or campaigns or polls. He asked her about her favorite colors. She said purple and sky blue. He asked what her favorite food was. She giggled and said, "I really love pizza, but they won't let me eat much now." He leaned in close and whispered, "Then I owe you a big pizza party someday." She laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was real. She asked him why he always wore a red tie. He grinned. "Because it reminds me to always be bold and never back down." She nodded seriously. I want to be bold too. He looked into her eyes, still holding her hand, and said, You already are. You're bolder than most people I know. The room was silent, but it was filled with something powerful. Connection. A deep, unspeakable understanding that sometimes forms between two people who, on paper, couldn't be more different. An 8-year-old girl from a small town, and a man who had held the most powerful office in the world. And yet here they were, equals in that space. Both just human. Both just sharing a rare, raw moment. She showed him the drawing she had made. An American flag with the words, Stay Strong, written across it in blue crayon. He asked if he could keep it. She beamed. Really? Absolutely, he said. It's going in my office. She told him she believed in heroes. That she used to think superheroes wore capes, but now she thought heroes were just people who helped others, even when it was hard. He smiled and nodded, eyes glistening just a little. That's exactly what a hero is, he said. And that's exactly what you are. Time slowed down. For that half hour, the machines around her didn't beep so loudly. The pain in her limbs seemed to ease. The fatigue in her mother's eyes melted into something else. Peace. A sense that, for this one moment, her daughter wasn't a patient. She was a star. Light. A little girl whose wish had been heard. And answered. Trump never once checked his watch. Never once looked rushed. He asked about her little brother. She told him how they used to build forts together out of pillows and blankets. He chuckled. That sounds better than any White House meeting I've ever had. She asked if he was ever scared. He paused for a second and then said quietly, Yes. But when you're scared you keep going anyway. That's what makes you brave. She nodded like she understood because she did. At 8 years old, Emily understood courage better than most adults. As the visit neared its end, he stood slowly but still held her hand. You've inspired me, Emily. I'll carry you with me always. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. I wrote this for you, he said, placing it gently on her blanket. You can read it later or have someone read it to you. It's just between us. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Her small fingers clutched the envelope like it was a treasure. He turned to her mother, Karen, and took her hand too. You raised a remarkable little girl, he said, voice full of genuine emotion. Karen, wiping tears from her eyes, whispered, Thank you for coming. You gave her the happiest moment of her life. He shook his head slowly. She gave me something too. And with that, he quietly walked out, pausing only to smile at the nurse waiting outside. No media. No interviews. No tweets. Just a quiet goodbye. Back in the room, Emily stared at the envelope. She didn't open it right away. She just held it to her chest. He's nice, she said softly. He's really, really nice. Karen sat beside her daughter, brushing hair from her forehead. Yes, sweetheart. He really is. That night, Emily fell asleep with a smile on her face. The next morning, she asked her mom to read the letter. It said, Dear Emily, thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like. You are brave, kind, and full of light. I will never forget our time together. Always believe in yourself. You are a hero to me and to so many others. With love and respect, Donald J. Trump. Karen framed the letter that same week. Emily passed away 10 days later. Peacefully. Without pain. With a letter on her nightstand and a photo of that visit by her bed. At her funeral, that letter sat beside her casket, along with the drawing she had given him. For Karen and her family, it wasn't just a visit. It was closure. It was comfort. It was the answer to a final wish made by a little girl who believed in strength, in hope, and in the kindness of someone she never thought she'd meet. And for Trump, though he never spoke of the visit publicly, it was one of those moments that didn't need an audience. Because some acts aren't about image or applause. Some are just about being human. The room was quiet as he stepped out, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow over the hushed hallway. Doctors and nurses stood nearby, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and quiet determination. He approached them, his usual bravado replaced with an uncharacteristic stillness. "She's strong," he murmured, voice low but firm. "You're all doing incredible work." "Thank you." The staff exchanged glances, surprised perhaps by the sincerity in his tone. The lead physician nodded, adjusting his glasses. "We're doing everything we can," he said carefully. "Her condition is stable, but the road ahead won't be easy." Then, without hesitation, "Then you'll have whatever you need. No limits." The words hung in the air, weighty and absolute. No negotiation. No conditions. Just action. The staff shifted, some blinking in disbelief. This wasn't a promise made for cameras or headlines. There were no reporters here. No aides scrambling to document the moment. Just a quiet exchange in the dim glow of a hospital corridor. He motioned to the girl's father, a man whose face was etched with the kind of weariness that comes from too many sleepless nights in waiting room chairs. They stepped away from the group, just far enough to speak privately. The father's hands trembled slightly, fingers knotting together as if trying to anchor himself. Then the words came, simple, direct, no fanfare. "I've already made arrangements. Your medical bills. Consider them handled." The father's breath caught. His lips parted but no sound emerged. The weight of those words was too immense, too unexpected. Before he could process them, the next sentence landed like a lifeline. "And when this is all over, whenever that may be, your family will never have to worry about finances again." The father's knees nearly buckled. This wasn't just reassurance. It was a seismic shift, an unburdening of a fear that had been crushing him for months. He tried to speak, to protest, to ask why, but the man cut him off with a firm grip on his shoulder. "Just focus on your girl." 3 days later the paperwork arrived. Official, crisp, bearing the seal of a private foundation. The hospital invoices were stamped in bold red letters. Paid in full. No strings, no conditions. Alongside them was another document. A college fund, established in the girl's name, for her younger brother. The father sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pages as if they might dissolve if he blinked. His wife stood beside him, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears spilling silently. They had braced for years of debt, of impossible choices, of sleepless nights wondering how they'd survive this. Now, in the span of a single conversation, that weight had been lifted. No cameras. No press releases. No self-congratulatory tweets. Just action. Across town, in a quiet office, the man sat alone, staring at his phone. The screen lit up with yet another headline. Another jab, another accusation. He swiped it away without reaction. His assistant hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "The press is asking about the hospital visit," he said. "They want to know if it was political." The man didn't look up. "No comment." The assistant hesitated, then pressed. "But sir, this could help with." The man cut him off, sharp but not unkind. "Some things aren't for them." The assistant nodded, understanding. As he turned to leave, he added softly, "The father called. He said thank you." The man gave no response. But when the door closed, his expression flickered, just for a second, with something unreadable. Back in the hospital room, the machines beeped steadily. The girl slept, her small frame dwarfed by the bed. On the bedside table, beside a cup of half-melted ice chips and a stack of well-worn get-well cards, sat a small stuffed elephant, a silent gift, left without ceremony. The nurses had noticed it that morning, appearing as if by magic. No note, no explanation. Just a gesture, quiet and deliberate. The kind that spoke louder than any speech or headline ever could. The hospital room was silent except for the slow, rhythmic beeping of the monitor, its steady pulse the only sign that time hadn't stopped entirely. The small figure in the bed seemed even frilier now, swallowed by blankets and tubes, her breath shallow but even. Outside the window, the sky was a pale, indifferent blue, the world carrying on as if unaware of the quiet battle being fought behind these walls. 2 weeks had passed since that first visit, since the promise made in hushed tones. The promise that had lifted a crushing weight from her parents' shoulders, allowing them to focus solely on her, on these final precious moments. And now, as the morning light filtered through the blinds, her tiny hands, one clutching a small American flag, the other resting atop a handwritten letter, finally stilled. The machines wailed briefly before a nurse rushed in, her face already etched with the knowledge of what had happened. The parents stood frozen, their grief too vast for tears, their daughter's face peaceful at last. The letter beside her, its crisp white paper stark against the sterile hospital sheets, bore a message in bold, unmistakable script. Dear Emily, you reminded me what real strength looks like. You are loved, cherished, and remembered. Thank you for inspiring me. Love, President Donald J. Trump. It was a letter that had arrived just days before, delivered by a quiet aide with no fanfare, no press, just a simple envelope handed to her father with a respectful nod. The girl had read it aloud, her voice weak but bright, her fingers tracing the signature as if it were a treasure. That night, for the first time in months, she had slept without pain, a faint smile on her lips. Now, at the funeral, that same letter sat in a glass frame beside her photograph, its words echoing in the hearts of everyone who passed by. The room was filled with flowers, with soft sobs, with the occasional laugh as someone shared a memory of her stubborn spirit, her relentless joy. Her parents moved through the crowd like ghosts, their hands clasped tightly together, their grief a private thing. But there was something else there too. Quiet gratitude. The medical bills had been erased as promised. The college fund for her brother stood untouched, a future secured. And though the loss was unbearable, the crushing fear of financial ruin, the shadow that had loomed over them for so long, was gone. They could mourn without that added weight. They could remember her without the gnawing dread of what came next. Across town, in a quiet office, a phone buzzed with the news. The man who had written the letter, who had made the promise, stared at the message for a long moment before setting the device down. His usual bravado was absent, his face, for once, unreadable. An aide hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak. "Sir, the press." "No," he interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Not this." The aide nodded and retreated, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Outside, the world continued its endless noise. The debates, the headlines, the relentless churn of politics. But here, in this moment, there was only silence. A life had ended. A family had been spared one kind of pain. And a letter, simple and heartfelt, had brought a little girl her final joy. Back at the funeral home, as the last of the guests drifted away, the girl's father lingered by her photograph. He touched the glass frame gently, his fingers brushing the edge of the letter. He didn't need to read it again. He knew the words by heart. You are loved, cherished, and remembered. For all the noise, all the division, all the chaos of the world, this small act of kindness, this quiet keeping of a promise, had mattered. It had given his daughter dignity. It had given his family peace. And as he turned to leave, the flag she had held so tightly now folded neatly beside her, he realized that was enough. The seasons turned, the world moved on, but the quiet weight of grief remained, a constant companion in the house where laughter once echoed. The parents moved through their days in a haze, their daughter's absence a presence all its own, the walls still adorned with her drawings, her favorite stuffed animals perched on the couch as if waiting for her return. Yet amid the sorrow, there was something else, too. Letters, thousands of them, pouring in from strangers across the world, each one a testament to the way her brief life had touched others. A mother in Texas wrote about how her own sick child had asked for a flag after hearing the story. A veteran in Pennsylvania sent his medal, saying the girl's courage dwarfed his own. The parents read them all, their grief softened, just slightly, by the knowledge that their daughter's light had reached so far. And then one morning an idea took root, a way to channel the pain into purpose. The foundation began small, just a website and a handful of volunteers, but its mission was clear: to grant wishes, no matter how simple, to children who, like their own, faced battles too big for their small bodies. A trip to the ocean, a meeting with a favorite singer, A letter from someone they admired. The first wish granted was for a boy who wanted to ride in a fire truck. The way his face lit up as the sirens blared was enough to keep them going. Meanwhile, in another part of the country, the man who had once sat in a hospital room and made a silent promise went about his life as usual. The rallies, the headlines, the relentless noise of public life. But if anyone expected him to speak of that day, to leverage it for sympathy or praise, they were disappointed. Not a word. Not a tweet. Not a single mention in interviews. It was as if the moment had existed outside of time, untouched by the chaos of politics. And yet, every December without fail, a small envelope arrived at the family's doorstep. No return address. No lengthy note. Just a card, crisp and unadorned, bearing the same 3 words in familiar bold script. She inspired me. The first time it came, the mother had wept. The second, she'd smiled. By the third, she'd begun to expect it, this quiet, steadfast reminder that their daughter had mattered. Not as a symbol, not as a story, but as a person. The foundation grew, its reach expanding, its mission unwavering. More children smiled. More parents felt, if only for a moment, the weight of their burden lift. And though the world outside remained divided, loud and often cruel, this small, quiet corner of kindness endured. Because this was never a story about politics or power or fame. It was about a little girl who loved flags and letters, who faced the unthinkable with a courage that defied her years. And it was about a man who, for once, set aside the noise and simply listened. Would you have done the same if it were your child? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories.